The Honourable Anne Colley.
Mr. Speaker, I must say that some people on the other side of the House seem to live on a different planet, because the reality is that the budget that Minister English delivered last week, his 8th budget, was indeed for New Zealand a great budget. It was a budget that signalled steady economic recovery and growth going out ahead of us in the years ahead of us. It was a budget that showed that this country had weathered the global financial crisis, which was followed quickly by the massive Christchurch, Canterbury earthquake, severe shocks to the economy of this country. And throughout that time, the government was at pains to protect New Zealand's most vulnerable. And it has shown, and this budget shows, that those hard years were worthwhile, and that the government's steering of a steady economic course is starting to pay dividends for New Zealanders. If you look at the 4 significant packages that the budget contained: innovative New Zealand and investing in the economy of New Zealand and research and development, backing science, $761 million. Public infrastructure, $2.1 billion of work in New Zealand in the years ahead. And Mr. Speaker, I want to spend my time talking about the budget focused on the social investment package of $652 million out over the next 4 years. Then that, of course, doesn't count the $2.2 billion being spent on health. I have to say, in my electorate, the major health issue that has been raised with me over the last year has been the bowel cancer screening, and so the announcement in the budget to roll that screening out to a national screening system has been greeted with joy and delight. In fact, we had the Bay of Plenty Mustang owners display of cars on the reserve outside my house at the weekend, and I went over, and because I love Mustangs, I must confess, to have a look and drool over some of the cars. And the interesting thing for me was that on a number of occasions the bowel screening national rollout scheme was raised with me a number of times. So that was obviously popular. But however, Mr. Speaker, Budget 2016 signalled that this government is committed to making a significant change in the lives of probably our most vulnerable children and young people, with $348 million identified to get started on making that significant change. And just to take members of the House back, remember last year I appointed the expert panel to have a look at the overhaul of child, youth and family so that we can get better results from them, knowing that 90 of that cohort they had a look at 21, 90% of them didn't have NCA level 2, around 25% of them, 90% were on a benefit, 25% of them were on a benefit with a child, almost 80% didn't have NCA level 2, and more than 30% had a youth justice referral by the age of 18. So the state does not do a particularly good job of looking after those young children it takes on the responsibility for. And I've released all the documents that came from that expert panel, the interim report that built the case for change, and then the final report and the cabinet papers that went with it that showed that cabinet, and so this government is determined to make a difference in the lives of those young people. And we have started work on the design of the new model based on 5 core services, from prevention to intensive intervention, care support, redesigning the youth justice system, and of course the transition into independence. And Mr. Speaker, the $348 million that was announced in Budget 2016 signals, as I say, this government's determination to get on with that job. So about $145 million of that is to stabilise the existing child, youth and family services. The number of children who are in care has grown and they're staying in care for longer. But more importantly, the complexity of the lives of those children have increased. And so we are seeing far more children that have been diagnosed with things like fetal alcohol syndrome. And for those children, a whole raft of care is needed and will be needed throughout most of their lives. But the other important issue that's come through the review is the understanding of the effect of violence on young children, not just when they're victims of violence, but the effect of witnessing violence and the trauma that those children suffer. And so a major change in the practice delivery for this new operating system that's under design currently is how we deal with that trauma early on in a child's life. So, as I say, $150 million is to stabilise the existing child, youth and family services, but then $200 million invested to get this new system under design, under development, and taking place, the first part of that operating system to be in place by the end of March next year. So a huge transformation program is underway, and we will have the first bill in the House in the next couple of days. But the important part was the strong signal from the budget that we are serious about this. We are serious about the social investment philosophy of investing early in children's and families' lives when there is dysfunction, and making a difference, making sure that the money that we're spending is actually effective, that the services we're providing are not duplicated, that they're culturally responsive, that they're effective, and that they're making a difference in these children and their families' lives. Mr. Speaker, the budget 2016 also meant that we were able to see several $1 million invested in ensuring that we get people and support people to get into work, because we know that that is the best way out of poverty, and we know that remaining on a benefit long term has not only long-term consequences for the family but for the children in that home. So the liability of the welfare system has reduced by $12 billion over the last 4 years, and that's a result of the really targeted, thoughtful processes that Work and Income have put into place to get in behind supporting people to find work for themselves and their families. So we've seen a reduction. That means that over the next lifetime of those people, 900,000, almost 1 million fewer people will be on benefits. We have in this budget 2016 $111.5 million over the next 4 years to support people into work. And I think the most important part of that has to be the $61.5 million that has been put into the expansion of the youth service. Now, the youth service currently works with young people, 16 and 17-year-olds, who are not eligible for a youth benefit, but for some reason are independent of their families. It's a wraparound service. It helps them manage their money. It makes sure that they're in education or in training as a first priority. For some of them, that is not possible, and we help them into work where we can. And we are actually making some headway with these young people. The idea is to expand that youth service, both initially supporting young parents who are now 18 and 19, and then eventually young people in that same age group, to make sure that we pick them up, stop them falling through the cracks, stop them going onto a benefit in the first place, because we know that if they go onto a benefit before they're age 20, they're likely to be on that benefit for 20 years. Mr. Speaker, there's $26 million to maintain the targeted case management and to fund the 3K to work that is now heading over the 2,000 mark, 2,000 odd people that we've helped move to find work or to take up work opportunities. And then we've got some pilots that we're running, both working with health and working with corrections. Mr. Speaker, finally, I want to just mention the $46 million in Budget 2016 for the sexual violence work that I congratulate my colleague Alfred Naro and the Select Committee have been working alongside us as we've designed a new system for sexual violence services in New Zealand. That consists, Mr. Speaker, of, for the first time, real focus on those first response services. So there's a 24/7 helpline. There will be professional assistance for the men and women
Sorry to have to interrupt the Minister, but her
who
time's
have been
expired.
affected.
David Clendon.